The iron door exploded inward with a sound like thunder splitting the earth, and through the swirling dust and darkness strode a figure whose eyes burned crimson in the blackness, his presence filling the fetid cell with a power that made the very stones tremble. And the girl, chained to the wall, her body nothing but hollows and jutting bones, her lips cracked and bleeding, her mind hovering in that twilight place between life and death, looked up through matted hair and thought with her last shred of consciousness that death himself had finally come to claim her. And she whispered a broken thank you as those burning eyes fixed upon her with an intensity that seemed to pierce through flesh and bone, to see the stubborn spark of life that refused, even now, to be extinguished. Wait, before the next revelation happens. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. The creature, for surely no man could move with such fluid grace or radiate such terrible beauty, crossed the cell in 3 strides. His coat, black as a raven's wing, swept behind him like the cloak of some dark prince from a child's nightmare. But the girl, whose name was Ilara, though she had nearly forgotten it after 23 days in this hell, felt no fear. Fear required the energy to care whether one lived or died, and she had exhausted that resource days ago. Who did this to you? The voice that emerged from the beautiful monster was like silk wrapped around steel, cultured and ancient, with an accent she couldn't place. Ilara tried to speak, but her throat produced only a rattling wheeze. Her tongue, swollen from dehydration, felt like leather in her mouth. She had not tasted water in 4 days. The slavers had forgotten her, or perhaps they simply didn't care. A girl who wouldn't fetch a price wasn't worth the expense of feeding. The vampire, for that was what he must be, with those eyes and that preternatural stillness, moved closer. She could see him clearly now despite the darkness. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with hair black as ink that fell to his shoulders. His face was all sharp angles and aristocratic planes, beautiful in the way a sword is beautiful, both elegant and deadly. He wore clothing that spoke of wealth, a silk shirt beneath the coat, tailored trousers, boots of fine leather. Everything about him screamed power and privilege. Everything about her screamed degradation and despair. "Your chains?" he said, and there was something dangerous in his tone now, something that suggested whoever had placed those chains would soon regret their existence. He reached out, and she flinched instinctively despite her exhaustion. But his hand, cool and impossibly gentle, simply grasped the iron manacle around her left wrist. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the metal began to glow, first red, then orange, then white-hot. The vampire's expression never changed. The metal didn't seem to burn him at all. The manacle shattered like glass. He repeated the process with her other wrist, then the chains around her ankles. When the last restraint fell away, Ilara slumped forward, her body no longer having the strength to hold itself upright. She would have crashed face first into the filthy stone floor, but the vampire caught her with movements too fast to follow. "Easy," he murmured, and there was something almost tender in his voice. He cradled her against his chest as though she weighed nothing at all, which, given her current state, might not be far from the truth. Through the thin, tattered remains of her dress, she could feel that his body was cool.
Not cold exactly, but without the warmth of living flesh. Yet somehow, impossibly, she felt safer in his arms than she had felt anywhere in months.
"Please," she managed to croak. "Water." "Soon," he promised. "But first we need to leave this place. Can you tell me your name?" "Ilara." It came out as barely a whisper. "Ilara." He repeated it like a vow. "I am Nathaniel Ashford, and I swear to you on my blood and honor that no one will hurt you again." She wanted to laugh at that, because what was the honor of a vampire worth? But she had no strength for laughter. And anyway, the certainty in his voice made something in her chest tighten with an emotion she had thought long dead: hope. Nathaniel carried her out of the cell with long, purposeful strides. The corridor beyond was lit by guttering torches that cast writhing shadows on walls stained with things Ilara preferred not to contemplate. She had been brought down here blindfolded, but she remembered the endless descent, the progressive dampness and cold, the sense of being swallowed by the earth itself. They passed other cells. She heard whimpering from behind some of the doors, defiant shouting from others, and from some, the terrible silence that suggested their occupants had already lost their battle with despair. Ilara wanted to beg Nathaniel to free them all, but she couldn't form the words. Her consciousness was already fraying at the edges. "Stay with me," Nathaniel said sharply, and the command in his voice was enough to jolt her back to awareness. "Do not let go yet. We're almost to the surface." She tried to focus on his face, using it as an anchor against the darkness that kept trying to pull her under. It was a remarkable face, she thought distantly. She had never seen anyone so beautiful. There was something eternal about him, as though he had been carved from marble by some master sculptor, and then breathed into life by forces beyond mortal understanding. They reached a stairway, and Nathaniel ascended with inhuman speed, his steps making no sound despite his burden. Up and up they climbed, until Ilara lost count of the floors. Finally, they emerged into a wider corridor. This one had proper lighting and windows through which moonlight streamed in silver bars. "My lord!" a voice called out, urgent and alarmed. "You can't just—" Nathaniel didn't even glance at the speaker. He simply raised one hand in a gesture that was both dismissive and commanding, and whatever the person had been about to say died in their throat. They kept walking. They passed more people, guards in leather armor, a woman in an expensive silk gown who gasped and pressed herself against the wall, a young man who opened his mouth to protest and then apparently thought better of it. No one tried to stop them. Whatever authority Nathaniel possessed, it was absolute. Then they were outside, and the night air hit Ilara's face like a benediction. It was late autumn, cold enough that her breath should have missed it, though Nathaniel's did not. She could smell wood smoke and horses, damp earth, and the distinctive metallic tang that always preceded rain. A carriage waited in the courtyard, black and elegant, pulled by 4 midnight horses that stamped and tossed their heads as Nathaniel approached. The door opened before he reached it, and a tall, thin man with graying hair and a severe expression looked out. "My lord, what?" He stopped when he saw Ilara, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite pity, but close to it. "Dear God!" "Prepare the rose room," Nathaniel commanded. "Have water brought immediately, and broth, something mild. Her stomach won't be able to handle anything heavy. Send for Dr. Blackwood as well. Tell him it's urgent." "At once, my lord." The man's efficiency was impressive. He snapped his fingers, and 2 younger servants materialized from the shadows. Instructions were given in rapid, clipped tones. Nathaniel settled Ilara onto the carriage's plush seat with surprising care, then sat across from her. The door closed, the carriage lurched into motion, and they were away.
In the lamplight inside the carriage, Ilara could see Nathaniel more clearly. She realized his eyes weren't purely red. They held flecks of amber and gold, like embers in a dying fire. He was watching her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did I free you?" He tilted his head slightly. "Because I was searching for someone, and when I opened that cell door, I felt something I haven't felt in a very long time." "What?" "Rage." The word was soft but absolute. "Do you know who imprisoned you there?" Ilara nodded weakly. "Slave traders. They took me from my village, evaluated me, decided I wasn't," she swallowed against the shame, "wasn't pretty enough or skilled enough to fetch a good price. So they left me there, to die, I suppose, or until they thought of another use for me." Nathaniel's hands, which had been resting calmly on his knees, slowly curled into fists. "That establishment belongs to Marcus Thorne, a vampire of considerable influence." "You're a vampire?" It wasn't a question. "I am." He didn't apologize for it or make excuses. "I am also the Alpha of the Eastern Covens, which means Marcus Thorne and his entire operation fall under my jurisdiction, and I do not permit this sort of barbarism in my territory." Ilara tried to process this information, but her mind felt like it was working through thick syrup. Will he come for me? Try to take me back?" "No." The certainty in Nathaniel's voice was absolute. "Marcus Thorne will not trouble you or anyone else ever again. I am going to make very certain of that." There was a promise in those words that made Ilara shiver, though not with fear. She found herself wondering what exactly constituted barbarism in the estimation of a vampire. Surely the simple act of buying and selling humans couldn't shock someone who lived by drinking blood. As if reading her thoughts, which, for all she knew, he could, Nathaniel said, "There are rules, Ilara. Ancient laws that govern how vampires interact with humanity. We take blood, yes, but it's a transaction, willingly given in exchange for protection, pleasure, or payment. We do not hunt indiscriminately. We do not torture. We do not starve innocent women in dungeons for the crime of being insufficiently decorative." The carriage hit a rut, and Ilara gasped as pain lanced through her. Her entire body was one massive ache, every bone and muscle screaming in protest against the simple act of sitting upright. Nathaniel leaned forward. "You're in pain." "Everything hurts," she admitted. Without warning, he moved to sit beside her, then carefully shifted her so she was leaning against him, her head resting on his shoulder. The position took pressure off her abused back and hips. His body, despite its lack of warmth, was solid and stable, and the smooth fabric of his coat was soft against her cheek. "Better?" he asked. "Yes." She closed her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You have a long recovery ahead of you." "Why do you care?" The question emerged before she could stop it. "I'm nobody, just a village girl who was stupid enough to be caught by slavers." "You are not stupid, and you are not nobody." His voice held a note of steel. "You survived 23 days of deliberate starvation in that hellhole. Do you know how remarkable that is? Most humans would have died within 2 weeks. You have strength in you, Ilara, more than you realize." She wanted to argue, but exhaustion was overwhelming her. The gentle rocking of the carriage, the solid presence beside her, the first feeling of safety she'd experienced in what felt like a lifetime, all of it conspired to drag her toward unconsciousness. "Sleep," Nathaniel said softly. "You're safe now. I promise you, you're safe." And against all logic and reason, Ilara believed him. She woke in a bed so soft she thought at first she was dreaming. The mattress seemed to embrace her, the pillows cradled her head like clouds, and the sheets, silk, Her fingers recognized even before her eyes opened, slid against her skin like water. For a long moment, Ilara simply lay there, afraid that movement would shatter the illusion and she'd find herself back in that cold cell, chains biting into her wrists. But no, this was real. The bed was real. The faint scent of lavender in the air was real, and the dull ache throughout her body, while painful, was a vast improvement over the screaming agony of before. She opened her eyes. The room was extraordinary. The ceiling soared at least 15 feet above her, decorated with elaborate plasterwork painted in soft golds and creams. The walls were paneled in pale wood and hung with paintings, real oil paintings, not cheap prints. The furniture was all elegant, a wardrobe that looked like it belonged in a palace, a vanity with a silver mirror, chairs upholstered in rose-colored silk. Morning light streamed through tall windows dressed in heavy curtains that had been pulled back to reveal a view of manicured gardens. Everything about the room spoke of wealth and taste and a level of luxury Ilara had only ever imagined. "You're awake." She turned her head, carefully because her neck was stiff, to find a woman sitting in one of the silk chairs. She was perhaps 40, with kind eyes and graying blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple gray dress with a white apron, the uniform of an upper servant. "I'm Mrs. Hartley," the woman said, rising and approaching the bed. "I'm the head housekeeper here at Ashford Manor. How are you feeling?" Ilara's voice came out as a croak. She tried to clear her throat. "Here." Mrs. Hartley lifted a glass of water from the bedside table and held it to Ilara's lips. "Small sips now, doctor's orders." The water was cool and pure, the most delicious thing Ilara had ever tasted. She wanted to gulp it down, but Mrs. Hartley was firm about the small sips, pulling the glass away after each one. "There now," Mrs. Hartley said, setting the glass down. "Better?" "Yes, thank you." Ilara looked down at herself and realized she was wearing a nightgown, soft cotton, clean and well-made. "What happened to my clothes?" "Burned," Mrs. Hartley said matter-of-factly. "They weren't fit for anything else. I took the liberty of dressing you last night after Dr. Blackwood examined you. I hope you don't mind." Examined her? Ilara felt heat creep into her cheeks. She had been unconscious while strangers undressed and handled her body. The violation of it made her stomach twist. "Dr. Blackwood is a professional," Mrs. Hartley said gently, as if sensing Ilara's discomfort. "And I was present the entire time. You were treated with complete propriety, I assure you." What did he say? The doctor?" Mrs. Hartley's expression grew somber. "That you're severely malnourished and dehydrated. You've lost a dangerous amount of weight, and there are signs of anemia and vitamin deficiencies. You have bruises and abrasions that will need time to heal, and the skin on your wrists and ankles where the manacles rubbed is damaged. But," her expression softened, "he also said that with proper care and nutrition, you should make a full recovery. Your youth is in your favor." Ilara felt tears prick her eyes. She'd been so certain she would die in that cell. The fact that she might actually survive, might actually heal, seemed impossible. "Now then," Mrs. Hartley said briskly, apparently uncomfortable with emotional displays. "Dr. Blackwood left strict instructions. You're to have liquids only for the first 3 days. Water, broth, weak tea. After that, we'll gradually introduce soft foods. Your stomach has been empty for so long that we need to be careful not to shock your system." 3 days! Ilara's stomach growled at the thought, but she understood the wisdom of it. "Master Nathaniel has given orders that you're to have whatever you need," Mrs. Hartley continued. "You're to rest as much as possible, and you're not to worry about anything. Not repayment, not work, nothing. Your only job is to recover." "That's very kind, but I can't just—" Ilara struggled to sit up and immediately regretted it as the room spun. "I need to earn my keep. I can work. I know how to clean and sew and—" "Absolutely not." Mrs. Hartley pressed her gently but firmly back against the pillows. Master Nathaniel was very clear about this. You are a guest in this house, not a servant. You will not work until you are fully recovered, and even then, only if you choose to. A guest? Ilara had never been a guest anywhere in her life. Even in her own village, she'd been the orphan girl who lived with her aunt, always slightly less than, always aware she was there on sufferance. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "Why is he doing this? What does he want from me?" Mrs. Hartley's expression grew thoughtful. "I've served Master Nathaniel for 23 years," she said, "and I've never known him to do anything without good reason. But I've also never known him to be cruel or capricious. If he's offered you his protection, then he means it. As to what he wants," she shrugged, "perhaps you should ask him yourself. He's been most anxious about your condition. I'm to inform him as soon as you wake." Before Ilara could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. Mrs. Hartley crossed to answer it, and a quiet conversation. She returned with a tray bearing a bowl of what smelled like chicken broth. "We'll start with this," she said. "Can you feed yourself, or shall I help you?" Ilara's pride wanted to insist she could manage alone, but when she tried to lift her arms, they trembled with weakness. "I might need help," she admitted, humiliation coloring her cheeks. "Nothing to be ashamed of," Mrs. Hartley said firmly. She settled on the edge of the bed and lifted a spoonful of broth. "You've been through an ordeal. Recovery takes time." The broth was rich and flavorful, and Ilara's stomach accepted it gratefully. They went slowly, pausing between spoonfuls, and by the time the bowl was half empty, Ilara felt exhausted again. "That's enough for now," Mrs. Hartley declared. "You did well. We'll try again in a few hours." "I'm so tired," Ilara murmured. "Why am I so tired?" "Your body is healing. Sleep is part of that process." Mrs. Hartley stood and smoothed the covers. "Rest now. I'll check on you later." Ilara wanted to stay awake, wanted to make sense of her new circumstances, wanted to understand what sort of bargain she'd inadvertently struck with a vampire. But her eyelids were already drooping, and within moments she was asleep again. She woke again in the afternoon. At least, she thought it was afternoon, based on the angle of the light through the windows. This time, she felt marginally more alert, though still weak. And this time, she wasn't alone. Nathaniel Ashford sat in the chair Mrs. Hartley had occupied earlier, reading a book. He was dressed more casually than he had been last night, in just a white shirt and dark trousers, but he still radiated that same aura of controlled power. His hair was tied back, emphasizing the sharp lines of his face. As if sensing her regard, he looked up. Those extraordinary eyes fixed on her, and she saw relief flash across his features. "Ilara, how are you feeling?" "Better," she said, and was pleased to find her voice sounded stronger. "Tired, but better." He set the book aside and rose, crossing to stand beside the bed. Up close, she could see details she'd missed in the dim light of the cell and carriage, the fine laugh lines at the corners of his eyes, the small scar on his left cheekbone, the surprising fullness of his lower lip. "Mrs. Hartley tells me you managed some broth this morning. That's good." She said, "I'm not to work." Ilara met his gaze directly, some of her natural stubbornness reasserting herself. "That I'm a guest. But I don't understand what that means. I'm nobody to you. Why would you?" "You keep saying you're nobody," Nathaniel interrupted. "I'm beginning to find it tiresome." The bluntness startled her. What? Every person has value, Ilara. Their worth isn't determined by their bloodline or their bank account or their appearance. He pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. "You asked me why I care. The simple answer is, because I can. I have resources and power that most people don't, and I choose to use them to help when I encounter injustice. But I'm just one person. There are probably hundreds of others in situations just as bad or worse." "There are," he agreed, "and I help where I can. But I was not in those cells last night. I was in yours. And now you're here, and you will recover, and you will decide what you want to do with your life once you're strong enough." Just like that. Just like that. Ilara studied him, trying to understand. In her experience, no one did anything without wanting something in return. Kindness always had a price. "You're wondering what I want from you," Nathaniel said, once again seeming to read her thoughts. "Yes. The truth? I don't know yet." He leaned back in the chair. "I acted on instinct last night. I felt your life flickering out like a candle in the wind, and I couldn't allow it. But beyond ensuring your recovery, I haven't thought much further." "You felt my life?" Ilara frowned. "How is that possible?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "Vampires are sensitive to life force. We can sense it in humans, some more strongly than others. Most humans feel like background noise, perhaps, a general awareness of their presence and vitality. But occasionally, very rarely, we encounter someone whose life force is particularly strong or distinctive." "And mine is? Yours is extraordinary." He said it simply, as if commenting on the weather. "Even dying, even at your weakest, you burned so brightly that I could feel you from 3 floors away. That's why I went to that cell. That's how I found you." Ilara didn't know what to make of that. She'd never felt special or distinctive in any way. She'd always been plain, ordinary Ilara, the girl with mousy brown hair and 2 thin limbs who was good at menial work and little else. "I don't understand," she said. "Neither do I, entirely." Nathaniel smiled slightly. "But I suspect there's more to you than you realize. And I find myself curious to see who you become once you're not fighting just to survive." There was something in his tone, in the way he looked at her, that made Ilara's heart beat faster. Not fear, exactly, but not quite comfort either. Something more complicated. "The vampire who owned that place," she said, changing the subject. "Marcus Thorne. You said you would deal with him." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "I have. Marcus Thorne no longer exists." The casual way he said it sent a chill through her. "You killed him. I executed him for crimes against vampire law. His entire operation has been dismantled. The humans imprisoned there have been freed and compensated. Those who worked for him are being investigated. Those who were complicit will face justice. Those who were coerced will be helped." Just like that, one night and it's all over. "I am the Alpha," Nathaniel said quietly. "My word is law in the Eastern Covens. When that law is broken, consequences follow swiftly." Ilara absorbed this. She should probably be frightened of this man, this vampire, who could speak so matter-of-factly about execution and justice. But instead, she felt a fierce satisfaction. Marcus Thorne and his people had hurt her, had planned to hurt so many others. Knowing they'd been stopped gave her a sense of vindication she hadn't realized she needed. "Thank you." "You're welcome." He stood. "I should let you rest. Is there anything you need? Anything at all?" "Actually," she hesitated, "could I have a book, if it's not too much trouble? It's been so long since I've read anything, and the time passes slowly when you're just lying here." Nathaniel's expression softened in a way that transformed his entire face, making him look younger, more human. "Of course. What do you like to read?" "Anything, really. Stories, histories, poetry. I'm not particular." He glanced at the book he'd been reading earlier. "Have you read this? It's a collection of Gothic tales, ghosts and mysteries, that sort of thing. No, but it sounds wonderful. He handed her the book, and their fingers brushed briefly. His skin was cool, as she'd noted before, but not unpleasantly so. More like touching marble that had been kept in the shade. "Enjoy," he said, "and call if you need anything. Just ring the bell on the bedside table and someone will come." "Thank you," she said again, and meant it with her whole heart. After he left, Ilara opened the book and tried to read, but her attention kept drifting to the door through which he'd departed. Nathaniel Ashford was unlike anyone she'd ever met. He was powerful and clearly dangerous, yet had shown her nothing but kindness. He was a vampire, a creature of darkness and blood, yet he spoke of justice and law with a conviction that seemed genuinely principled. What sort of man, vampire, was he really? And more unsettling, why did she find herself hoping she'd get the chance to discover the answer? The next few days passed in a haze of sleeping and eating small amounts, punctuated by brief periods of wakefulness, during which Ilara gradually felt her strength returning. Mrs. Hartley was a constant presence, efficient and kind, overseeing Ilara's care with the precision of a general commanding troops. Dr. Blackwood visited daily, a silver-haired man with gentle hands and a no-nonsense manner. He examined her wounds, applied ointments to speed healing, and carefully monitored her progress as they gradually increased her food intake. "You're doing remarkably well," he told her on the 4th day. "Your body is responding beautifully to treatment. In another week, I think we can have you up and walking a bit." "A week?" Ilara couldn't keep the frustration from her voice. "I'm already going mad just lying here." Dr. Blackwood chuckled. "A good sign, actually. Boredom indicates recovery. But patience, Miss Ilara. Rush the process and you'll only delay it further." He was right, of course, but that didn't make the waiting any easier. Nathaniel visited every evening. He never stayed long, just enough to check on her progress, exchange a few words, sometimes bring her another book. He was unfailingly polite, but maintained a certain distance, as if afraid of overwhelming her with his presence. Ilara found herself looking forward to those visits more than she cared to admit. There was something deeply compelling about Nathaniel, something that drew her despite all reason. Maybe it was gratitude coloring her perception. Maybe it was simple loneliness. Or maybe there was something more, something she wasn't ready to examine too closely. On the 5th evening, he arrived to find her sitting up in bed, wearing a proper nightgown and bed jacket that Mrs. Hartley had provided, her hair brushed and braided. "You look better," he observed, settling into his usual chair. "I feel better. Dr. Blackwood says I'm healing faster than expected." "Because you're strong. I told you that. Or because I'm receiving exceptional care." She gestured around the beautiful room. "All of this, it must be costing you a fortune." Nathaniel waved a dismissive hand. "I have several fortunes. What good are they if not to help those who need it? Most wealthy people don't think that way. Most wealthy people are fools." He said it without arrogance, just stating a fact. They accumulate resources and then guard them jealously, as if gold and jewels could keep them warm at night or ease their loneliness. "Are you lonely?" The question escaped before Ilara could stop it. She immediately felt her face heat. "I'm sorry, that was impertinent." It was honest. Nathaniel tilted his head, considering. "Yes, sometimes I'm lonely. Immortality has its drawbacks. Everyone you care about ages and dies while you remain unchanged. After a while, you learn not to get too attached to mortals. It's self-preservation." "How old are you?" Ilara asked, "if you don't mind my asking." 247. He smiled at her expression. "I was turned in 1778 during the American Revolution. I was 28 years old, a soldier fighting for independence." "You're American." "I was. Now I'm simply old." He leaned back. I've lived in a dozen countries, spoken 20 languages, seen empires rise and fall. The world has changed in ways I could never have imagined as a mortal man. And yet, some things remain constant. Cruelty, injustice, the strong preying on the weak. Is that why you enforce the laws so strictly? Because you've seen too much cruelty? Partly, but also because someone must. Vampires are predators, Ilara. That's our nature. Without rules and consequences, we would terrorize humanity. The system we've built, where vampires govern themselves and punish those who step out of line, it's imperfect, but it's better than the alternative, which is chaos or war. Humans outnumber us 1,000 to 1. If they ever united against us, we'd be destroyed. The only reason we coexist is because most humans don't know we exist, and those who do have reason to tolerate us. We provide protection, solve problems, maintain order in our territories. It's a delicate balance. Ilara absorbed this. She'd grown up hearing stories about vampires, terrifying tales meant to keep children from wandering at night. None of those stories had mentioned laws or governance or vampires who cared about justice. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "A monster, I suppose. Someone who'd take what they wanted without caring about the consequences." "There are vampires like that. I hunt them down and destroy them." His eyes flashed red for just a moment, a reminder of what he was. "But most of us are trying to exist peacefully. We were human once, after all. We remember what it was like to be vulnerable and mortal." "Do you?" Ilara asked softly. "Remember being human?" "Yes." The word was quiet. "I remember being cold and hungry and frightened. I remember watching friends die in battle. I remember feeling powerless against forces larger than myself. Becoming a vampire gave me strength, but it didn't erase those memories. If anything, they're clearer now than they were then." "Do you miss it, being human?" Nathaniel was silent for a long moment. "Sometimes," he finally said, "I miss the simplicity of it, the certainty of mortality. When you know you have only a limited time, it makes your choices matter more. When you have eternity stretching before you, it's easy to become complacent." "You don't seem complacent." He smiled. "I try not to be, but it's a constant battle against ennui." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Ilara found herself studying him in the lamplight, noting the way shadows played across his features, the elegant lines of his hands, the controlled grace of his posture. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. When you first saw me in that cell, what did you think?" Nathaniel met her gaze directly. "I thought you were the bravest person I'd ever encountered. Because you were dying, and you knew it, and yet you held on to life with both hands. You refused to give up. That kind of determination is rare, Ilara. It's precious." Her throat tightened with emotion. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever looked at her and seen strength instead of weakness. "I didn't feel brave," she whispered. "I felt like a coward, like I should have fought harder when they took me, like I should have found a way to escape." "You survived. That's its own form of courage." He leaned forward. "Don't diminish what you endured, Ilara. You were wronged terribly, but you lived through it. Now you have the chance to build something better." "I don't know how," she admitted. "I don't know what to do with myself. I have no family, no home, no skills beyond menial labor. What kind of life can I build from that?" "Any kind you want." Nathaniel's certainty was absolute. "You're young and intelligent. You can learn new skills, discover new passions. The world is full of possibilities. Easy for you to say. You have power and wealth and immortality. I also spent the first 30 years of my mortal life as an indentured servant. The statement hung in the air between them. My family was poor, and my father sold me into service to pay his debts. I worked on a plantation, subjected to the whims of a master who saw me as property. I understand more than you might think about feeling powerless. Ilara stared at him, seeing him in an entirely new light. How did you escape? I didn't. Not in the traditional sense. I earned my freedom by fighting in the war, and then I was turned. He stood, smoothing his hands down his trousers. My point is that your past doesn't dictate your future. I was a servant, then I was a soldier, then I became what I am now. You get to decide who you become, Ilara, not your circumstances. You. After he left, Ilara lay awake for a long time, turning his words over in her mind. Who did she want to become? She'd spent so much of her life just trying to survive that she'd never really considered the question. But now, lying in this soft bed with her belly full and her body healing, she had the luxury of contemplation. And she found that beneath the fear and uncertainty, there was something else stirring. Curiosity about this strange new world she'd been thrust into, about vampires and their society, about the enigmatic man who'd saved her life. And deeper still, beneath even the curiosity, was a spark of something that felt almost like hope. By the end of the second week, Ilara was able to get out of bed with assistance. Her legs were wobbly and weak, but it felt like a triumph to stand on her own feet again, to take halting steps around the room supported by Mrs. Hartley's capable arm. "Excellent progress," the housekeeper declared. "Another few days and you'll be walking on your own." The prediction proved accurate. 3 days later, Ilara managed to cross the room unaided, and the victory of it brought tears to her eyes. She was reclaiming her body, taking back the strength that had been stolen from her. With increased mobility came increased restlessness. The Rose Room, beautiful as it was, had become a gilded cage. Ilara longed to see more of the manor, to feel sunlight on her face, to experience something beyond these 4 walls. When she mentioned this to Nathaniel during his evening visit, he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look almost boyish. "Then tomorrow we'll remedy that. If Dr. Blackwood approves, I'll take you on a tour of the house and grounds." "Really?" Ilara couldn't keep the excitement from her voice. "Really. You've been cooped up for too long. Some fresh air will do you good." Dr. Blackwood did indeed approve, with the caveat that Ilara shouldn't overexert herself. So the following afternoon, dressed in a simple day dress that Mrs. Hartley had altered to fit her still thin frame, Ilara emerged from the Rose Room with Nathaniel as her guide. The manor was even more impressive than she'd imagined. The corridors were wide and high-ceilinged, decorated with artwork and tapestries that spoke of centuries of accumulated wealth. There was a grand library with floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with books, a music room with a gleaming piano, a gallery hung with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. "Are these your family?" Ilara asked, studying a painting of a severe-looking man in colonial dress. "No, they came with the house." Nathaniel stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back. "I bought this estate about 60 years ago from a family fallen on hard times. They couldn't afford to maintain it, so I acquired it, furnishings, art, and all." "Don't you have family of your own?" "Not anymore. Everyone I was related to by blood has been dead for over a century." He said it matter-of-factly, but Ilara heard the ghost of old pain beneath the words. They moved on, through drawing rooms and parlors, past a dining room with a table that could seat 20. Servants nodded respectfully as they passed, and Ilara noticed that they didn't seem afraid of Nathaniel. If anything, they appeared comfortable, even fond of him. "How many vampires live here?" she asked. "Just me. The staff are all human. I employ about 20 people. Servants, groundskeepers, guards. They're well paid and well treated, and most have been with me for years. They know what you are? Of course. I don't hide it from the people under my roof. They have a right to know. He glanced at her. Does it disturb you, knowing what I am? Ilara considered the question honestly. It should, probably, but no, not really. You've been nothing but kind to me. That matters more than what you are. Something flickered in Nathaniel's eyes. Pleasure, perhaps, or surprise. You're more accepting than most. Most people haven't had their lives saved by a vampire. They descended a grand staircase to the ground floor, then passed through a conservatory filled with exotic plants, orchids and ferns and flowers Ilara couldn't name. Beyond the glass walls, she could see manicured gardens stretching toward a line of trees. "Can we go outside?" she asked. "If you feel up to it." The afternoon was crisp and clear, the sky a brilliant blue unmarred by clouds. Ilara took a deep breath of the cool air and felt something in her chest expand. Freedom. She was outside, unbound, able to walk where she wished. They followed a gravel path through formal gardens where late-blooming roses still clung to their bushes. Beyond was a small lake, its surface mirror-smooth, reflecting the sky. "It's beautiful," Ilara said. "I've always thought so. Sometimes I come out here at night and just sit, think. It's peaceful." They walked slowly, Nathaniel matching his pace to hers, never showing any impatience with her halting steps. When they reached a stone bench overlooking the lake, he gestured for her to sit, and gratefully she did. For a while they sat in companionable silence, watching ducks glide across the water. Then Ilara asked the question that had been gnawing at her for days. "What happens next? For me, I mean. I can't stay here forever, living off your charity." "Why not?" Nathaniel's tone was mild. "Because it's not right. I need to, I don't know, find work, build a life, support myself." "Admirable sentiments, but there's no rush. You're still recovering." "I know, but eventually." She trailed off, unsure how to articulate the anxiety churning inside her. "I'm grateful, truly. You saved my life, and you've given me so much. But I need to understand what you expect from me, what this costs." Nathaniel turned to face her fully. "It costs nothing, Ilara. I expect nothing. When you're fully recovered, if you want to leave and build a life elsewhere, I'll help you do that. I'll provide money for a fresh start, letters of reference, whatever you need. Or," he paused, "you could stay." "Stay? As what? A servant? As whatever you wish. A member of the household. A student if you want to further your education. A companion if you simply want time to figure out what you want from life." He held her gaze. "I'm offering you a choice, Ilara. No strings attached. No expectations, just options." It was too generous, too good to be true. Ilara's instincts, honed by years of hardship, screamed that there had to be a catch. "Why?" she asked. "What do you get out of this?" Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he said, "Honestly, I don't know. Perhaps I'm lonely, and your presence is pleasant. Perhaps I see something in you that intrigues me, and I want to see how you develop. Perhaps I'm simply old enough and wealthy enough that helping you gives my existence meaning." He smiled slightly. "Perhaps it's all of those things. You barely know me. Then let me know you better. Stay here, at least for a while. Recover fully. Learn whatever you want to learn. And at the end of it, if you want to leave, you can do so with my blessing and my support." Ilara studied his face, searching for deception, and finding none. He seemed sincere. But could she trust that? Could she trust him? More importantly, could she trust herself not to become dependent on this luxury, this safety, this strange connection she felt to a vampire who should have been a monster, but somehow wasn't? "I'll think about it," she said finally. "That's all I ask." Nathaniel stood and offered his hand. "Come, we should get you back inside before you tire yourself out." She took his hand, cool and strong, and let him help her to her feet. As they walked back toward the manor, Ilara found herself already knowing what her answer would be. She would. Not forever, perhaps, but long enough to heal, to learn, to figure out who Ilara, the free woman, could become. And if part of her motivation was the desire to spend more time in Nathaniel's company, well, that was something she'd examine later. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable pattern. Ilara's strength returned gradually but steadily. She began taking her meals in the small dining room rather than in her bedroom, sitting at the long table with Nathaniel when he was available, eating alone with a book when he wasn't. She learned that he kept unusual hours, often sleeping during the day and conducting his business at night. "Vampire metabolism," he explained. "We can be active during daylight, but it's uncomfortable, like a human staying awake for 3 days straight, possible but not pleasant." Mrs. Hartley arranged for a tutor, a middle-aged woman named Miss Pemberton, who came 3 times a week to help Ilara brush up on reading and arithmetic. To Ilara's surprise, she had a natural aptitude for numbers, and Miss Pemberton encouraged her to study bookkeeping and accounting. "You have a logical mind," the tutor said approvingly. "With proper training, you could easily manage household accounts or even work in a business office." The idea fascinated Ilara. She'd never imagined having a profession, a skill that could make her valuable in her own right, rather than just another pair of hands for menial labor. She also began exploring the library in earnest, devouring books on history, science, philosophy. Nathaniel seemed pleased by her intellectual curiosity and often joined her in the library during the evenings, the two of them reading in companionable silence. Sometimes they would discuss what they'd read, debating philosophy or arguing about historical events. Nathaniel had lived through many of the events Ilara only knew from books, which gave their conversations a surreal quality. "You're wrong about the French Revolution," she insisted one evening, her eyes bright with passion. "It wasn't just mob violence. It was people who'd been oppressed for generations finally saying enough." "I'm not saying their grievances weren't legitimate," Nathaniel countered. "I'm saying that guillotining thousands of people, many of them innocent, wasn't justice. It was revenge masquerading as revolution. But you execute vampires who break your laws. How is that different? Due process, investigation, proportional punishment. I don't round up everyone associated with a criminal and slaughter them indiscriminately." He leaned back in his chair, regarding her with amusement. "You're very passionate about this." "I just think," Ilara pounced, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm sorry, I'm probably being tiresome." "Not at all. I enjoy hearing your perspective. You think differently than most people I encounter. It's refreshing." Ilara felt warmth bloom in her chest at the compliment. Over the weeks, she'd become acutely aware of how much she valued Nathaniel's good opinion, how much she looked forward to their evening conversations, how her pulse quickened when he entered a room. It was dangerous, this growing attachment. He was a vampire, immortal and powerful, and she was just a human girl he'd rescued on a whim. Whatever she felt, it couldn't lead anywhere. The disparity between them was too vast. But knowing that didn't stop her heart from racing when his eyes met hers across the library, or her skin from tingling when his hand accidentally brushed hers reaching for the same book. One evening, about 6 weeks after her rescue, Nathaniel invited her to join him for dinner. A real dinner, not the casual meals they'd shared before. She dressed carefully, in the nicest of the gowns Mrs. Hartley had provided, a deep blue silk that made her eyes look brighter. When she descended to the dining room, she found the table set with crystal and fine china, candles providing warm illumination. Nathaniel was already there, dressed in formal evening wear that made him look like he'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "Thank you. So do you. I mean," she fumbled for words, "you look very handsome." He smiled and pulled out her chair. The meal was exquisite, multiple courses, each more delicious than the last. Ilara noticed that while Nathaniel had food on his plate, he barely touched it. "Can you eat?" she asked. "Regular food, I mean." "I can, though it provides no nutrition. It's purely for the taste and the social aspect." He took a sip of wine. "I do miss food sometimes, the pleasure of it. There are certain flavors I remember from my human life that I'll never quite experience the same way again." "Do you miss other things from being human?" "Many things. The warmth of the sun on my skin, the ability to sleep and dream, the simple passage of time, the way days used to feel meaningful because there were only so many of them." He set down his wineglass. "But I don't miss being powerless. I don't miss watching people I care about suffer while I stand by helplessly." "Is that why you enforce your laws so strictly? Because you can prevent suffering now?" "Partly, though I won't pretend it's purely altruistic. Maintaining order serves my interests as well. A territory in chaos is vulnerable to takeover." "Are there other vampires who want your territory?" "Always. The Eastern Covens control a wealthy, populous region. There are those who would love to claim it." His expression hardened. "They're welcome to try." The predator beneath the civilized surface flashed through for just a moment, and Ilara was reminded that for all his kindness to her, Nathaniel was dangerous. He hadn't become alpha by being weak or merciful to his enemies.
"Does that frighten you?" he asked, reading her expression. "Knowing what I'm capable of?" "No," she said, and realized it was true. "It probably should, but it doesn't. You've never given me reason to fear you, and I never will." It was a promise, and she believed him. They moved to the drawing room after dinner, where a fire crackled in the hearth. Nathaniel poured brandy for himself and offered some to Ilara, who accepted. They sat near the fire, and for a while just enjoyed the warmth and the comfortable silence. Then Nathaniel said, "I have something to tell you. Marcus Thorne's trial revealed information about the slave ring's operations. We found records, names of people who were taken. I've been working with my people to track down the families and return their loved ones when possible." Ilara's hand tightened on her glass. Did you find anything about me? About where I came from?" "Yes." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Your village was Millbrook, about 200 miles south of here. You were taken along with 2 other girls during a raid. The village records indicate your parents died when you were 8, and you were raised by your mother's sister." Millbrook. The name alone brought a flood of memories. The small cottage shared with Aunt Margaret, the fields where she'd worked during harvest, the market square where she'd sold eggs on market days. "The other girls," she said, her voice tight. What happened to them?" "One was recovered and returned to her family. The other—" Nathaniel's expression grew grim. "I'm sorry, Ilara. She died before we shut down the operation." Ilara closed her eyes against the sudden sting of tears. She'd known that girl, Sarah, barely 16, sweet-tempered and shy. To think that she'd died in some dark cell while Ilara survived felt impossibly unfair. "I've made arrangements for her family to receive compensation," Nathaniel continued. "It's not adequate. Nothing could be. But at least they won't face financial hardship on top of their grief." That's good of you." Ilara wiped at her eyes. "What about my aunt? Is she—" "Alive and well. Still in Millbrook." He hesitated. "I could arrange for you to return if that's what you want, or I could bring her here to visit, if you prefer." Return to Millbrook, to Aunt Margaret's disapproving frown and her endless lectures about proper behavior, to a life of scrubbing floors and mending other people's clothes, to the crushing knowledge that she'd always be the orphan girl, the burden, never quite good enough. "No," Ilara said,
I don't want to go back. Are you certain? She's your family. She took me in because she had to, not because she wanted to. She never let me forget that I was there on sufferance. Ilara stared into the fire. I'm grateful for what she provided, but that place was never home. I have no desire to return. Then you'll stay here. There was something in Nathaniel's voice. Hope, perhaps? If the offer still stands. It does, for as long as you want. Ilara turned to face him. In the firelight, his features seemed softer, more human. I don't understand you, Nathaniel. You're the most powerful vampire in the region. You could have anyone, anything you want. Why do you care what happens to me? He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those extraordinary eyes. Then he said, when you've lived as long as I have, you become numb to most things. The world loses its luster. People become predictable. But then, occasionally, you encounter someone who surprises you, someone who makes you feel something again. And I surprise you? You terrify me. He said it with a slight smile, but she heard the truth beneath it. Because I find myself caring what happens to you, caring whether you're happy or sad, comfortable or in pain. I think about you constantly, wonder what you're reading, what you're thinking. When I'm conducting business, part of my mind is always calculating when I can reasonably return home to see you. Ilara's breath caught. Nathaniel! I know it's inappropriate. You're under my protection, living under my roof. There's an inherent power imbalance that makes any feelings complicated at best. He set down his brandy glass and stood, moving to the window. I've tried to maintain proper distance, to be respectful, but I find it increasingly difficult. She stood and crossed to him, her heart pounding. What if I don't want you to maintain distance? He turned to face her, and the intensity in his gaze made her shiver. Don't say that unless you mean it, Ilara. I'm trying very hard to be honorable here. I mean it. She reached out tentatively and touched his hand. His skin was cool, as always, but his fingers immediately wrapped around hers, strong and sure. I've been fighting this too, telling myself it's just gratitude or loneliness or some kind of trauma response, but it's not. I care about you, Nathaniel. You make me feel safe and valued and seen in a way no one ever has before. You should run, he said. But even as he spoke, his free hand came up to cup her cheek. I'm not a safe choice, Ilara. I'm a predator. I'm dangerous. I don't care. You should. But I don't. They stood there, frozen in that moment of tension, his thumb brushing gently across her cheekbone. Then, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Nathaniel lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost reverent, his cool lips soft against hers. But when she made a small sound of pleasure and pressed closer, the kiss deepened. His arm came around her waist, pulling her against him, and she could feel the controlled strength in his body, the power he was carefully restraining. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, or at least she wasn't entirely sure he needed to breathe. Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "This is a terrible idea," he murmured. "Probably," she agreed. "You could get hurt. Not by me, but by association with me. I have enemies who wouldn't hesitate to use you against me. I know. And I'm immortal. You're not. Even in the best-case scenario, I'll watch you age and die while I remain unchanged. I know that too." She pulled back enough to look into his eyes. "But I'm tired of living in fear of what might happen. I spent weeks in that cell thinking I would die without ever having really lived. Now I have a chance to live, and I want to take it. With you, for however long we have." Nathaniel searched her face, And whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he pulled her close again, holding her as if she were something precious. "Very well," he whispered into her hair, "but we do this carefully, slowly. I won't rush you, and I won't take advantage of your gratitude or vulnerability." "It's not just gratitude," she insisted. "I know, but we have time to be sure, time to let this develop naturally." He kissed the top of her head. "I've waited 200 years to feel this way about someone. I can wait a little longer to do things properly." Ilara smiled against his chest, feeling happier than she could remember being in her entire life. It was strange, she thought. 6 weeks ago, she'd been dying in a dungeon, certain her life was over. Now she was standing in a warm drawing room, held in the arms of an impossibly ancient vampire who looked at her like she was a miracle. Life, she was discovering, had a peculiar sense of humor. The next few weeks passed in a haze of happiness. Nathaniel courted her properly, walking with her in the gardens, having long conversations about everything and nothing, sharing books and ideas. He never pushed for more than she was comfortable with, though there were more kisses, each one leaving her dizzy and wanting. But there was also a growing unease that Ilara couldn't quite shake. Nathaniel's world was dangerous, and she was naive to think she could exist in it without consequences. Those consequences arrived on a cold November evening in the form of a visitor. Ilara was in the library when she heard the commotion, raised voices, the sound of something breaking. She set down her book and moved to the door just as Mrs. Hartley appeared, her face pale. "Miss Ilara, you need to come with me, now." "What's happening?" "There's a vampire here demanding to see Master Nathaniel. He's—" She swallowed hard. "He's dangerous. The Master wants you safe."